students always ask how you get a job. If you don't mind, can you tell us how you got this job?
For this job, we're going to talk about being the curator for the United States exhibit for the Prague Quadrennial. I'm on the board of directors of USITT, and part of my involvement has been with the international activities. And I was asked to head up the curatorial team of the USITT national exhibit. We were looking at other curators to bring on the task. We had gone to approach Tony Walton, Kerry Robbins, and I was asked to head up this group of characters to curate the content of the exhibit. In my position with the board of USITT, I also became, as I refer to, as the co-conspirator with Markéta Fantova, who is the artistic director of the exhibit. She and I crafted the mission statement. Over the course of 3 years, we looked at shaping what was the theme of this exhibit. And my involvement really came in that I've been to the Prague Quadrennial several times, and I wanted to do an exhibit that I thought embraced the spirit of PQ. To be honest, my experience had been that most of the exhibits that the United States did were much more like museum exhibits. I refer to it as pinning cardboard on a wall. I really wanted to find a way to do something that was more interactive, more inclusive of an audience, less of a museum piece and more of an installation. And here it is. That's going to be two different questions, kind of. We're going to look at that as this exhibit in general, and then how about design in particular, maybe? When we first started this process, one of the first things we wanted to do was to break the mold and have a competition for the design of the exhibit itself. So we did advertised and held a national competition of designers the design brief was essentially to design an installation for USITT that would represent United States artists at the Prague Quadrennial. We received a lot of entries. We chose one group that we started working with. We ultimately found that the group that we were working with were not great collaborators. As the heart of design is collaboration, every time we would have a conversation, they would come back and say, yes, but here's our idea. And we finally just parted ways, and we went to the artist who was our second choice, who turned out to be an absolute dream collaborator. And I suppose that it's a daunting task between Markéta, myself, Tony Walton, and Kerry Robbins. Frankly, I don't know what designer in their right mind would want to take on that assignment. But we found Klara Ziglarova, who was an absolute gift and was an absolute brilliant collaborator, and took suggestions, had a conversation, created a dialogue, digested a lot of diverse ideas, and came up with her own fresh approach to the ideas that were given. So I think that in terms of a design process, that's the key. It's collaboration, it's listening, it's taking clues from other people and listening to what they're saying and then incorporating them into your own vision, your own ideas. And I think that in my own design work, that's the key. For me as a designer, I find a thread, something that gives me entrance into the world of that play. When you're dealing with a play, you're dealing with a text, opera, there's the written word. But I usually find something that connects the written word to a visual idea. Not really so much research, but inspiration. Because a lot of times it comes from a magazine, It comes from a photograph. It comes from some odd thing that I've stuffed into a drawer that makes me think of that world. And that's my entrance. That's that portal into the world. And then you start to shape it and mold it with conversation and dialogue with your collaborative artists. The Prague Quadrennial gave us the option of one of 3 themes for this year's quadrennial. It was weather, politics, and music. In 2011, the United States National Exhibit was about politics, so we felt that that was done. Weather was intriguing because we, as artists, come from all different ends of the country, and how weather affects our lives became an interesting thread. We also found that truly, if you look at weather in the United States, politics becomes intrinsically involved with that. And there's a music to it. There's sound to weather. So we felt that weather was an apt metaphor for design. So hence our vortex. We had started early on looking at Marquetta and myself, looking at the writings of Robert Edmund Jones, who was an inspiration to us as artists. And it's listening to his writings and how he talked about the impact of the art on people, it started to drive us into a direction. So this whole idea of this vortex, this swirling, this tornado, you know, we kept on wordsmithing. Tornado and hurricane had negative connotations about weather, death, and destruction, which we wanted to avoid. So vortex, this idea of sweeping, of involving and encompassing the world, the nation, became the metaphor. We also, as curators, really wanted to show the incredible breadth and depth of American design. You know, there are many countries that have one school. I was just talking to a friend of mine who's the curator for the architecture exhibits, who's from Norway. Norway has one theater school. There are 12 design students in the country of Norway. I teach in a university that's one of, 150, 200 universities, theater programs in the United States. I have 12 students alone. So you start to try to look at the United States, it becomes a daunting task. And we wanted to show artists that the world wouldn't otherwise see. So we really were casting a net wide and vast. We as curators were less interested in an individual artist and more interested in an entire collaboration, an entire production. So what we're showing, for the most part, are entire productions. You're looking at the collaborative efforts of scenic designers, lighting designers, costume designers, projection designers, directors, choreographers, composers. It's really all-encompassing. And we were intrigued with how all those elements came together. We also wanted to show that work, so we had chosen as a format for the exhibit a lot of video. So we're using video screens and we're using iPads as a major way of communicating the visual ideas. And then we added a few artifacts also, which are the art and craft of the profession. This was a very difficult project to actually design. Clara, as you can tell, it's this twisted mess. And there was only so much that she could actually draw.
Yeah.
So again, back to collaboration. This is a real collaboration between the designer, the curators, and very importantly, the people who actually built the exhibit, which were the students at the University of Indiana. We had looked at the big problem was, as we knew, the staircase up was a spine of the exhibit, and then the actual basic pieces that were the structure that supported that became the only thing that was solidified. The rest of this has changed every time we've installed it. So when we did a trial setup in Indiana, we assembled it all, we did all the twisting and turning and added it all in. We'd look at it from a distance and look at the aesthetic, the balance of the whole piece. And then we added the artifacts, the screens, and then looked at that and then changed the whole design, the whole arrangement, because the balance became very different. And then when we added the lighting, real magic happened, because the exhibit, which has a floor, a grounding, and then up at the eye level, all the artifacts, again, and then the lighting from Gantham with the RGBW lighting fixtures, it all of a sudden had a base that allowed it to float. And then with tweaking lighting up overhead, again, we came to a balance of it. Same thing happened when we got here to Prague. A funny story, the officials of the Prague Quadrennial were very concerned about our exhibit, because apparently the reports were from the cartage company that they were very worried because they had all these crates that were just piles of twisted trash. They didn't know they couldn't understand what we were going to do with this. And then when we came here, and literally like a hurricane that started attacking and assembling this, they were again very concerned with where it was going. But at the end of the day, when all the pieces came together and the dust settled and you moved all the crates away, this incredible sculpture, this incredibly interactive being came into its own. There is no one way to communicate, to design, to create. I think that you not only, as an artist, as a designer, you have to be a chameleon. You can't have one way of designing, one way of drawing, one way of speaking. Every production has its own world, its own way of coming into birth. And that collaborative team changes all the time. So you have to find a way to talk. This was in some ways a shotgun marriage. We threw everybody together and you find your way through it. I think the key for me is you are as open as possible, that the biggest skill, the greatest skill is listening. Listen to what people say. Digest what people say. I think the hard thing is that to learn to listen as opposed to comment. There are many times that I've learned, Marquetta she'll attest to this, because I was the one that was sending emails at 3 in the morning, because I would wake up and, having digested overnight the things that we had talked about, something clicked. It all came together. And I would fire off an email or a note or something and then go back to sleep. But it was just the ability for all of us to listen to each other, and to none of us involved were trying to run it. None of us were trying to force an idea. We were all listening to each other and playing off of each other and taking it to the next level, the level that none of us singularly would have imagined, but collectively imagined. I think that we all just rolled up our sleeves and did this. We all participated. There was nothing in this that we were afraid of doing. We collectively, and I'm saying collectively, Marquetta, Clara, myself, on the side of the curatorial team, we were the hands-on team, because Tony and Carrie were in New York, and they were very busy, so they were very active in the selection. We were very active in putting it together. So things like hanging the lights, adding the pieces, framing pictures, adding the mylar to the back, wrapping the cord, we all did it. We all pitched in. And I think that that's important. None of us were above being a part of it. This morning before we started, it was like, okay, let's go wipe off these things. We're all a part of that team. We're all in it together. Nobody was here to tell people to do things. The students' opinions and their ideas were equally important to us. So I think that just being a part of that, don't be afraid to pitch in. Don't be, it's the old, don't ever ask anybody to do something that you wouldn't do yourself. And I think that you lead by example. And I think that for these students, they put in so much work that to me it's our obligation to give back whenever we can. Have a conversation, learn what they're interested in, share information with them. That's important. And that's what PQ is all about.
Is there anything else?
Oh, there were so many funny stories. I think that the really important thing is that we, from the curatorial team, are incredibly proud of what everybody did. We are really proud and thankful for the way the people like Gantham, ETC, really supported the U.S. exhibit. I think all the artists who brought their work to us, and even those artists who were not being shown, we still honored their work. All that work is on the USITT website and will stay there. Instead of a printed catalog, we chose to do an electronic catalog, feeling that that had greater access. I think this is a celebration of the art of theater. It's a celebration of the making of theater. And I'm just deeply, deeply honored to have even been a part of that.